welcome to the Copperhead Sisters. My name is Ivy, and I am one of the writers who runs this channel. I'm also the artist you will see working in the background. In honor of Halloween, I decided it was only fitting our first video be spooky in some way, so I've decided to share with you all some of the scary or unexplained experiences that I have had. My writing partner and best friend sadly couldn't join us for this first video, but you will meet her in the near future. Let's begin. So for the first story I'm going to share with you, this is actually my first potentially paranormal experience I ever had. I'm a little bit of a skeptic, so I like to say that it's unexplained, but at the time, I was pretty freaked out because I am a chicken. So it all started when I was a little kid. I was super young, like 6 or 7 years old, and I was going on a trip across the country with my grandparents. We left from where I used to live in New Mexico, and we're going all the way across to California. So we essentially needed to stop at a few places for the night, and we were en route to try and get to one of these motorhome parks for the night, when at some point my grandfather had taken a wrong turn. We essentially went down this long dirt road for 30 or 40 minutes. We ended up coming to a dead end. This was a very narrow dirt road, so it was hard for the RV to turn around. Now the thing is, the only thing at the end of this long dirt road was a giant cemetery. It would not be unreasonable for me to say that it was exactly like the cemetery that they filmed the first Night of the Living Dead in. It was that kind of classic, terrifying cemetery with the big imposing memorials to people. Literally, the Addams Family house could have been right smack in the middle of this thing. And I, as a kid, really liked watching old horror movies. So literally, my first thought was, this is a classic scary cemetery. But I was like, you know, it's fine, it's creepy, but we'll turn around. So my grandmother was outside of the car trying to help my grandfather get everything turned around, and I was, in the meantime, just kind of staring over at the cemetery because I was a little bit fascinated by it. The only cemetery that we had in the town I grew up in was kind of like small, and most of it was just simple and understated, just small wooden crosses, nothing elaborate at all. And so I was actually quite interested by it, and I was staring at this large looming tree. And I looked away for just a second. And when I looked back, there was a white shape, a human-like shape. It almost to me looked like it was a sheet that had gotten caught in the tree, and it was moving, kind of shifting back and forth slowly, almost as if it was being moved by wind. But the thing is, the night was perfectly still. There was no wind, there wasn't even a slight breeze. There was no way that a sheet or a plastic bag could have gotten blown up into this tree. And I stared at it at first because I was confused and I was trying to figure out what it was. And I asked my grandfather, I was like, what's that? And he got this extremely freaked out look on his face. And you could tell that even he, who was, you know, completely not a person who believed in this, was a little bit scared by it. And I was like, should we tell Grandma? And he basically was like, no, we need to get the car turned around. So I was not sure about this, but I kind of trusted him, and I kept my eye on this weird figure that was in the tree. And as soon as my grandma got back in the car, sorry about the traffic in the background, literally there were no cars, and then I start filming. It's 2 a.m. So confusing. But the second my grandmother got back in the car, we sped off back down this dirt road, and we told her about it. And she was, of course, you know, justifiably angry, and, you know, and she was like, what? You know? Because, yeah. And to this day, I still don't know what it was or if it was a person. I don't see how it could have been a person because it was floating halfway up the tree. It was like something got caught in the tree. And again, it was moving. It was a terrifying experience, genuinely terrifying. And again, I don't know if it was just a person who was for some reason creeping in a cemetery at like 9 or 10 at night, or if perhaps it was something else. For those of you who've ever had the pleasure of being able to swim in an open lake, you will know exactly the feeling I'm about to describe. Floating on your back in the middle of the water and not knowing what is underneath you, and knowing that if something happens, you're too far from shore to swim back. While I don't actually have much of a fear of the water, ironically, I'm scared of everything else, but water is just not something that scares me. I'm not afraid of drowning. I'm not afraid of really anything that comes to water. I have only one very specific fear about being in the water, which is swimming backwards and bumping into a dead body. I don't know why I have a fear of this. This is my strongest fear, for sure. I can go into deep water, doesn't bother me. This bothers me. It's something that I think about every single time I get in the water, and it's just a nightmare of a situation for me. I think also, too, I'm partly scared a little bit of bumping into a zombie in the water, so we'll pick that apart at some point. But the thing is, there have been a few times that I have been legitimately scared to swim in the lake near my home. And one of these experiences I actually had with the co-owner of this channel, again, my best friend. We were out in the water, basically just messing around, having fun, swimming about, enjoying ourselves. And we had made jokes before about like, oh, there's a sea monster in the lake, or, whatever, just harmlessly teasing each other. Until one day, the harmless teasing sort of wasn't really a joke anymore. We were out in the water, in the deeper part of the water, and both of us came up and were looking out towards the rest of the lake, and very near to us, maybe a few yards away, we just heard an absolutely terrifying sound. And we still do not know the source of this sound, but all we heard that broke the silence, because it was evening when we were out swimming, was just this terrifying sound behind us. Thinking about that out in the water still scares me to this day. In my life, there have been a few places that I've been that make my skin just crawl, that are so overwhelming for some reason that I feel like I can't go within a mile of them. And I live very, very near to one of these places. The other, thankfully, is all the way back in New Mexico. So the thing is, this place that I'm going to talk about is terrifying, and I hate it. And I hate it even to this day. I am a stubborn person when it comes to even believing in some of this stuff, but this room, it's terrifying, and I don't even know why it is as terrifying as it is. So there is I'm gonna call it a junk store. It's almost like a junkyard, but inside. And it's just a normal junkyard. It has like weird kind of metal stuff, like you can find scythes and chains and like old like equipment stuff. And then on the back wall, there are tons of different kinds of like glass jars and kind of knick-knacky antiques. This whole area is like packed with stuff. Like, it's so packed, it's very hard to walk through. You need a flashlight to look at anything. It's all covered in cobwebs and dirt. It's kind of, a little bit of a weird place, but in general, the front side of the building is fine. In fact, it's actually kind of interesting to go there and find some neat stuff. I've actually found some interesting little things there over the years, from figurines to my meat hook, which is a weapon I'm saving for the zombie apocalypse, don't at me, as well as useful tools for art and everything. I have no problem with the front of this store, it's fine. The problem with this store is the back room. This is an area where if you literally just step up the stairs, 2 small stairs, I feel like you enter an entirely different building. Something about this room is just wrong. And every single person who's ever gone into this room has said the exact same thing. It's just that it is wrong, and there's something about it that is unsettling. And I don't necessarily know why. Essentially, the man that owns this place goes and buys storage lockers that people couldn't pay for anymore and buys the lots and sells them off here at his store, essentially. So a lot of the items in this room are very personal. You can see at times there will be medals that people won. There was like a medal that I think a fire chief had won, like a commendation, and all kinds of journals and like weird family portraits. It's definitely a much more like personal area of the store, even though everything in this store was owned previously by somebody else. This area is just different. And in a way, maybe it's different because these things were taken away from someone without maybe them donating it and giving their consent to sell it. But in this room, a few things have happened that have genuinely made me never want to go back to it again. I haven't been there for a couple of years, and I force myself to go if I'm trying to show somebody this room, but I hate it. The first time I went into this building and I went into the back room, I felt overwhelmed immediately when I walked in there. And this was before I even knew that these were personal items that he had essentially bought from people who couldn't pay for their storage equipment. I was overwhelmed and I was sad, and I couldn't figure out why I was so sad and upset about being in this room, and I didn't want to be in this room. And when I was walking down one of the aisles, I saw a journal, and because I sketch, I was like, hey, let me see if it's lined. Maybe I can buy it as a sketchbook. And I opened the book and I saw that it was actually a journal from a little boy. I think he was 9, is what he said in it. And as I was reading through, there were only a few pages that were filled out where he was talking about how his family was struggling. Like, I think his parents had separated, and he was talking about how he was spending time with his dad and that they were struggling. And it was just a child's journal. There wasn't anything in it that was like particularly wild, but there was something about it that was so heartbreaking. And it was, I don't know how to describe it. It was just a feeling that it's like there was more to this journal than there was. And I had to put it down, and the arm that I had been holding it in, it went numb. It went numb, and I got dizzy, and I felt like I was going to faint. I'm not a fainter. I'm really not a fainter. I make jokes about it, but I'm genuinely not. It has to be pretty extreme for me to get to the point where I'm like, I might actually pass out. And I stumbled out of this room trying to keep my composure because I was in public, and it's just these words are just burned into my head, and I feel like it's inappropriate for me to be too specific about some of the details because this was a person who owned this, so, you know. But it was strange. And there are a lot of these strange things in this room where if you go in there, sometimes you will hear people talking. I'm not even kidding you. You will hear people talking, and there is no way to get around to the back of the building. It's a very small building. It's a very crowded building, very small building. There are no people outside that can be talking. The guy that runs it doesn't have a TV, but you'll just hear people talking. I kid you not. And so on my last visit, and this is last time I've been in here, I had brought a flashlight, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna make myself go in this room. It cannot be as bad as I think it is. I'm gonna go in there and I'm gonna look, because also there was actually something in this room that I had seen ages ago that I was like, you know what, if this is still here, I'm gonna get it. So I put on my big girl pants and I went into the room, and my flashlight, which had been working the entire time, I've had this flashlight forever, never had any problems with it. I had not needed to replace the batteries because I did it like a couple of weeks before and they had been totally fine. It was fine in this store, and I just need to clarify that it was fine, because the second that I went up these stairs and took a few steps into this room, the flashlight fucking turned off. It flickered and it shut off. And when I looked down at it, it turned back on, and I was like, okay, weird coincidence. It's fine. I went deeper into the room, and it flickered on and off the entire time I was in this building. And again, I could hear voices through the walls to the outside. I was the only one there except for my parents, who were at the front of the store talking to Oopsie. And I could hear them talking to him, so I know it wasn't them. And the flashlight turned off. So I set the flashlight down on top of a stack of books, and, you know, just to satisfy some fucked up curiosity that I have, I actually asked if there's anybody here, mess with this flashlight. And within a second of me saying that, the flashlight turned off and then shut off completely. And it didn't work again for months after this. And now, by the way, this flashlight works just fine again. But the second that happened, I ran the hell away. And I haven't been back since. So honestly, I feel like the guys from Unsolved Mysteries need to pop out here, because this back room is absolutely terrifying. Is it sad that telling these stories to my camera right now is scaring me? So my house is totally not haunted, I promise you. There's nothing wrong. Before we get into our final story for this evening, or day, wherever you may be, I would like to tell you about the sort of running joke that we have that my house is totally not haunted. Because my house is totally not haunted. Everything is totally explainable. So the joke is that when I first moved here, it's been a long time since I've had this impression, I felt like there was, very specifically, a little old man that lived in the woods behind my room and stared at the house. It was just something that I felt. I, kind of made a joke about it, because again, I'm a little bit of a skeptic, so I'm, not sure if I'm just creeping myself out or if there's something there, but basically I was just like, yeah, there's this little old man that lives in the woods, and I absolutely terrified my friend when she was living here. Completely terrified her. She did not like the jokes of the man in the woods, and I felt like he was just living back there for a majority of the time that I lived here. It's only been the last year that I felt like I haven't sensed the man's presence. But our house has a few creepy things because we live in a very weird house. I'll go into that in another video. That's its own thing. But I have made jokes about things where, like, I'll hear noises in the house, or the lights will go out, or stuff will rattle, and there'll be unexplained noises, and pretty much me and my family just kind of like laugh and go, oh, haha, house is totally haunted. Yeah, sure, it's fine. But there have been a couple of weird things. One of which being the lights on it's essentially the, outside wall of my room. And at one point, I was sitting in here, I was talking to a friend, I was like, oh yeah, there's totally a demon that lives on this side of the house. Haha. That's why the light switch over here always breaks, because the light switch literally always breaks. Don't have any other problems with any of the other lights in the house, but on this particular wall, shit just happens. Literally, I woke up one day and the light switch was just broken. We have one of the flat ones that you click back and forth. It was completely fine. And when I went back to it, whatever little mechanism is in there to make it pop into one position, it was just broken. It's broken. I didn't do it. Nobody else would have done it. So it just broke for some unexplained reason. And the lights will go out. In fact, the lights up above me are out right now. And part of this joke that there was a demon up above is the lights were going out again. And meanwhile, I was actually trying to film a video on the last incarnation of this channel. The lights just started flickering like crazy. And yeah, and they had been doing that for about a month. And my friend was there when it happened. And, I was like, oh, haha, totally a demon. And then literally the next day, the lights just went out on that panel. And they were just out after maybe a few minutes of making a joke that there was a demon, and the lights just went out, and they're still out on this side of the wall, and I haven't gotten around to fixing it, so that's a thing. There also is a lot of times like a bunch of weird situations where stuff gets moved around in the house. For a while, an entire box of things just disappeared, and we don't have a lot of stuff. We're not furniture people, so there was no way that it could have gotten hidden. I'm still missing a bunch of my things, and they're just gone, and we don't know where they are, and then periodically they will pop up, and it's weird and it's unexplained, and it might just be a goof, but it is kind of a running joke that we're like, oh yeah, the house is totally not haunted. And I don't actually think that my house is haunted. I make jokes about it, and it could just be one of these things where literally a ghost could throw a brick at my head and I would still be like, it's not haunted, but you know, maybe be a little cautious when you stay over here. Mwahahaha. Now, on the subject of my house totally not being haunted, let's talk about sleep paralysis and other terrifying night visions or experiences. So I have sleep paralysis all the time. I am one of those people that sees shadow people. I sleepwalk, I sleep talk, and I have a lot of weird stuff that happens essentially when I sleep. And I'll again have to do another video on this. It's kind of like that back room. It could probably use its own video. But I would like to tell you about a couple of the scariest things that have happened to me meanwhile I've been asleep that I genuinely don't believe were sleep paralysis, even though I have it, because again, I know what that's like, and these have been, we'll just say, different. So first of all, I would like to talk about the shadow people that I see. I see them all the time, hanging out, wandering around, and like again, I mentioned I sleepwalk. In fact, there have been a few times where I've woken up standing in the middle of my room, holding things for my room. Literally just about a month ago, I woke up and I was standing in the middle of my room with an X-Acto knife in one hand and a pair of scissors in the other, so who the fuck knows what I was doing? It's not uncommon for me to do these things and to see these things. A lot of times it's at a point where I see it so regularly that I kind of just ignore it and go back to sleep. As sad as that is. But the most terrifying thing that has ever happened in regards to the shadow people is one time I woke up in the middle of the night and there were 5 or 6 of them standing over me, staring down at me, and the one in front leaned over and in like a gruff male voice just started yelling at me and just said, "Get up. You need to get up. You have to wake up now. You have to wake up." Just over and over and over again, and I was frozen because I was terrified and I couldn't move. And then eventually I sprung up and I turned on my lights and there was nothing in the room, and I was so terrified I did not sleep for the rest of the night, so I stayed up. They woke me up. Gotta get your ass out of bed. It's 4 a.m. It's time to work. And now the last scary experience in regards to this that I feel will leave this on a terrifying note is about a year ago. I was going to bed and I had curled up and closed my eyes for just a few minutes. And right when I was sort of starting to drift off to sleep and get comfortable, I just heard this growl, this terrifying growl right in my ear that was to the outside because I sleep on my side. And I even felt like a hot breath on my ear. When I heard this sound, I literally thought there was like a dog or something that was inside of my room standing on my bed. I could practically feel the pressure on my bed. And I was so terrified because I woke up and I just opened my eyes and I stared into the darkness and I was so scared I thought I was going to pee myself. And then after a moment I rolled over and I saw that there was nothing there. And I don't know what that was. But again, my house is totally not haunted. Don't even worry about it. Well, now, thank you so much for listening. Hopefully, some of these stories brought a little bit of a chill to your spine. Do you guys have any unexplained experiences that you've had? I'm always very fascinated by this, even if I am a little bit skeptical. I just find it very fascinating. But yes, in the future, our videos will be more lighthearted, I guess you can say, or at least educational or hopefully helpful. At least I hope they will be. So come back later. I will also be posting a couple more videos here on the 1st of November about NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month. So pop in for that. And yeah, have a creepy and hopefully safe evening of Halloween. Bye.